Oh man, it's been a while. I have no idea what I'm doing. What is up, my dudes? It is Ash, and today I'm gonna be talking about Diego Hargreaves. Welcome, my friends, my fam, my homies, my dudes, to Overanalyze number 2, where we're gonna be talking about number 2. So yeah, today we're just gonna be talking about Diego Hargreaves, analyzing him as a character. So we have 2 things that we're going to talk about. So first, his personality isolated from his relationships, and second, all of the major relationships in the entirety of the first season. Like I said, we're just gonna jump right into it because I got a lot to talk about, and hopefully it's not gonna be an hour long because I have a friend coming over today. Woo! So there are 2 main groups of personality traits isolated from his relationships that I want to talk about today. The first group is the fact that Diego is rebellious, angry, and impulsive, and we're going to talk about those. So the first one that I'm going to be talking about is the fact that he is rebellious. So this one I have like the least amount of evidence for, but I still, kind of want to talk about it. We're shown that he is rebellious because they talk about the fact that he was kicked out of the police academy when he was in it. This is mentioned like in passing. We don't get a whole lot of details, but Detective Patch does mention to him that his rights to go to crime scenes and to be a detective is when he got kicked out of the academy. And so, he was obviously rebelling from the rules, and we see him do that a lot. He goes to a crime scene literally without like, there are still police there, and he just shows up and he like sneaks around a little bit and talks to their main witness before they're allowed to. He talks to Agnes before Patch even gets a chance to like look at her. So obviously he's very rebellious. So the second part that I'm going to talk about is the fact that he is very angry. This is shown within the first 10 minutes of the first episode. After they show the girl giving birth, they show all of the other siblings and everything, like they're doing stuff, and then we get back into the house, and he immediately lashes out at two people that we are going to talk about today, Luther Hargreaves and Vanya Hargreaves. Automatically. Like, he doesn't even say hi to them. One of the first things he says to Luther is that, Reginald, when they're talking about how he died and saying, it was just a heart attack, it's not a big deal, he says he was an angry, bitter old man who got what he deserved. I'm pretty sure that's the exact quote. He says that directly to Luther, who we talked about last time, loved his dad. He did not want his father, he didn't want anyone disparaging his father's name. He was like, no, I loved him, he was a great man, he was a good man, which isn't true. So we're just not gonna get into that today. But yeah, that was the first thing that he said to Luther, one of the first things that he said to Luther after not seeing him since he moved out. And then the first thing that he says, not even to Vanya, he sees Vanya, walks right past her, and asks Allison, what's she doing here? Because he is still angry about the fact that she wrote a book about them. He says she shouldn't be there after what she did, which we didn't know in the first episode, but we obviously know now that she wrote a book about him. There is also a point where he and Luther just start fighting. They start hitting each other. It's a huge fist fight, and it's just because he started talking trash about Reginald again. He is constantly talking bad about his father. He is constantly telling everyone that he hates his father. He's constantly just an angry little ball of rage. And there is a point where he gets into a fight with Luther, and then right afterwards, Vanya tries to call him out for doing that, and he says, do you have enough material for your sequel yet? Which is just another thing where he's just so angry about everything, and it's shown so frequently. It's shown when he is constantly talking about killing Hazel and Cha-Cha. He wants to do it so badly, and we're lucky that we got that development where he didn't actually kill Cha-Cha, who is dead now, so sucks. But he didn't actually kill her because he grew from that. But throughout the entirety of the whole show, He is talking about how he wants to kill Hazel and Cha-Cha. He's glad that his father is dead. He's angry at everyone that he knows, including Detective Patch. Despite going to her during other circumstances, he just automatically, like without even thinking it through, snaps at her. Even though she's actually being very supportive she's being very supportive for him. So I think that's really interesting. I think that the fact that he is just so angry all the time is going to come into play a lot in the second season, and I'm excited to see that. But going back to the Vanya part, he's constantly deflecting the blame. Like when he was fighting with Luther, she came to him and said, you know, even like, are you happy now? And he just immediately just deflects and goes to talking to her about something that she did 1,000 years ago. And she comes back with, he was my father too. So she thinks that he's angry because Reginald is dead. But I think that he is just constantly angry because of, that's just his personality, that's who he is. And obviously it has stuff to do with the relationships that he has. But I think it also has to do with just how he has grown up and who he's become as a person. Diego is also extremely impulsive. We see this many, many times during the show, but there are just a couple instances that I want to point out first. The first one is that he starts fighting Luther at the funeral almost immediately. It is without thinking, he just goes and starts fighting him, and he's enjoying doing it because that's just who he is, but he's not thinking anything through. He's just constantly just like, okay, fighting time, because that's the only way he knows how to do things. And before he, like I said, before he even thinks it through, he just throws a knife right at his brother. And obviously he wasn't throwing it to hurt him, he was just throwing it to make a point and to say like, no, I'm number one, you're not. Even though Luther has always been categorized as number one, and we'll get into that more. But it's just who he is, that's what he does. He doesn't think before he does anything. The other one, there are a few more. There are a few things. The second part that I want to talk about is that he grabbed the monocle. When Reginald died, Diego decided that, he saw Reginald's monocle with Grace, and he knew immediately that Luther was going to start blaming Grace for that, for Reginald's death. And so Diego takes the monocle and throws it away, even though he knew that Luther wanted it. He knew that Luther would want it, and he knew already that he wanted it. So he took the monocle without really thinking. Obviously he probably had a little bit of like, I maybe shouldn't do this because Luther will get upset, but he still did it anyway because that doesn't matter to him. He doesn't care that Luther's going to be mad at him. And so, you know, he took the monocle without thinking about it and threw it into the lake without really thinking about it. We see like a moment of contemplation, but it's mostly just because he likes being dramatic, so he's very like brooding, and then he's like, here we go, and then it just slips into the ocean. And I think that's super impulsive because Luther is insane and he's obviously just very like, well, who cares if Luther's gonna be upset about this? I don't. Haha, here we go, down into the ocean. And then the third one that I want to talk about is just the fact that he literally jumped through a glass window on a door that was already unlocked, didn't check the door. The rest of his siblings went into the building in different ways. Diego just curled up into a ball and jumped through the glass window, because obviously when you want to be subtle, you break all of the glass in a man's house. And this can either be him being impulsive or him just being an idiot, but both, I guess, for this one. And then my last kind of personality trait that I want to talk about without talking about the relationships is that Diego is extremely insecure. And we can't really talk about this without talking about other relationships, but I guess there are just a few little points that I want to bring up. We see this with him always trying to one-up his siblings, and this isn't talking like relationships as in he just wants to one-up Luther, which we will get into, but he is just constantly always trying to one-up his siblings. And that's another thing that, you know, the glass could be considered when he breaks through the glass door. He could just be trying to one-up his siblings who got in there without, you know, having to break anything down. But instead he was just like, well, here, you know what? I'm gonna make a scene. And then he jumps through the window. And like I said, this could just be him being an idiot, but this is called overanalyze, and that's what we're doing today. But that is all I'm going to talk about with his personality traits isolated from his relationships, just because I can't really get into a whole lot of specifics without talking about his relationships as well. So that's the first part of this. Welcome to the second part. Relationships. Woo! So the first person that I want to talk about with Diego's relationships is obviously Reginald the Monocle Hargreaves. My least favorite man in the whole world. So as I've pointed out before, from the get-go, Diego automatically makes it very, very clear to us as watchers and his siblings, as people who have known him for a very long time, that he hates his father. And they obviously knew that before, but he hasn't seen them in a while and he just wants to get it out there, so he automatically just starts talking about how much he hates his father. He was happy, obviously happy, when talking to Luther about the fact that Reginald had died. He said that he got what he deserved, which I think I agree with Diego, but he was also talking to his brother, who he knows loved Reginald more than anyone else in the entire family. So I do think that that was it was a poor choice. I think that if he had talked to maybe Klaus about it, Klaus would have been like, I agree, man, and then try to give him some pills. But he did say, you know, Reginald got what he deserved. He just kept bringing up the fact that he was dead and he was happy about it. That was something that Diego did not stop talking about. It's true also that none of the other Hargreaves siblings really are very vocal about their hatred for Reginald. There is some obvious, you know, like Klaus talks about it occasionally, and Allison didn't say anything, but it also looked like she agreed with Klaus when he was talking in that first episode. But that wasn't with everyone else. They never really discussed that in earshot of Luther, or of most of the other siblings. But Diego is the most loud about it. And so why is he the most loud about it? There are two reasons I believe he is the most vocal about it. The first one is that Reginald never allowed Diego to be who he wanted to be. Diego always wanted to be number one, and this is shown so much in the first season. This is much more obvious with things that he does and says when he's around Luther, but I think Reginald was the one who really pushed the fact that Luther is the top dog. The rest of you fall down to the bottom, which is also where Vanya sits. Vanya's at the bottom, and it's shown in like everyone else's personalities where they sit on that scale. It's shown like kind of how they react to that stuff, and I think that second place is probably the worst place to be, and that is where he put Diego, because you're not quite number one, but you're also not as bad as the rest of your siblings, and I think that affected him well into adulthood, and it is also why, I mean, probably part of the reason he is so angry and he is so impulsive and rebellious. So Reginald really made everyone, but mostly Diego, have this inferiority complex that they can't get rid of. I fully believe that the reason that Reginald really looked down on Diego was because he had the stutter. Reginald thought that the stutter made him somehow less important, and it was a flaw that he wanted Diego to get rid of, and that's why he had Grace coaching Diego on how to get rid of it. But it was just something that Reginald looked at as a sign of weakness. And obviously it's not. There are a lot of people with stutters who are great people. And like, I mean, it's just, you know, it's just a speech problem, and that's okay. But Reginald wanted his kids to be perfect. He wanted them to have powers. He wanted them to be the next big superheroes. And with a stutter, Diego couldn't say the things he wanted to say to, like, you know, other people, like bad guys. That's what I was trying to get at. I lost my train of thought halfway through and I was like, I'm just gonna keep rolling with this. And then I'm like, I don't know what to say. Anyway, yeah. So I think that the stutter was a huge problem for Reginald, and that was a part of the reason that Reginald really couldn't look at Diego as a suitable number one. So Reginald also treated all of his kids absolutely terribly, and I believe that Diego is the most angry out of all of them and the most vocally angry out of all of them, because he is angry enough for all of his siblings, and he loves them. I believe he loves them, because if he didn't, there wouldn't be a lot of what goes on. There would just be, you know, Diego just kind of being indifferent and not caring. He acts like he's indifferent, but I believe he loves his family, and he knows that what Reginald did to them was bad, and that's why he, you know, is always trying to be angry for the rest of them, and be angry enough that they will not really feel the need to be as angry as he is. And then my second thing, talking about kind of how Diego's angry all the time and how he is very rebellious, is because I think he was afraid of Reginald. There are a lot of kind of puzzle pieces that sort of fit together as to like why one of them would be angry or afraid of Reginald, I mean. And I think that part of that was just because Reginald was a very, very intimidating guy, and he forced them to do a lot of things that they wouldn't want to do, especially looking at Ben as a character, and him asking, like, do I really have to do this, when he has to go in and kill a bunch of those bad guys. I think that if you look at how Reginald treated his kids, I'm sure Diego was afraid of him. And so I think that he had all of these things that he wanted to say and things that he wanted to do, but Reginald would not let him do it. Not necessarily in action, but just by the way he acted. I think that Diego knew that he would not be allowed to do or say the things that he wanted to. Now that he's left home, he hates the rules and he wants to rebel from everything, because he was not allowed to rebel when he was a child. He was not given that chance that a lot of teenagers have to just be rebellious and then suffer the consequences for it. He was just not allowed to rebel at all. I think probably when he left home was the first time that he had ever really rebelled from Reginald, and that was why he hates following the rules now, because he wasn't allowed to do that back then. The second relationship I want to talk about is Diego's relationship with his mother, Grace. This I don't have a whole lot to talk about, but I do kind of want to just bring it up. Diego loves his mom more than probably anyone there. And he always just wants to see the best in her. He wants to look at her and think, she was my actual mom. Because the problem is, she was more of a mom to him than Reginald was a father to him, and she's a robot. Reginald was a human being and acted like a robot. Diego looked at Grace and she was a robot, but she acted a lot more like a human being than Reginald did. And I think that that's horribly sad. Like, it makes me really, really upset. But he does view Grace as his mom. And she was a mom to him, unfortunately, because he was not allowed to have a family. He wasn't allowed to have a father who loved him and a mother who loved him. So he looked at the one person who cared about him, who cared enough about him to help him with things that he needed help with, such as finding his knives and helping him with his stutter, as, you know, his mom. And as he's grown up, he's always still thought of her as his mother. And when she died in like episode 3 or 4, I believe, it was episode 3. It was episode 3. When she died in episode 3, it crushed him. And I think that that's mostly because she's the only family that he really looks at and thinks, okay, this person actually cares about me. The rest of his family, they've never really shown a whole lot that they care about anyone else in their family, other than Klaus maybe caring about Ben, but that's just because he can see him constantly. And Allison and Luther caring about each other because incest, why not? Sorry, I need to stop bringing this bitterness into my videos because it's... Anyway, So that is why, I mean, I just think that his relationship with Grace is really, really sad, and I think that's why he cares so much about her, is because he didn't have a whole lot of people care about him. And so when he sees this person who has seemingly cared about him for his entire life, you know, he wants to think that she is human, and he wants to think that she will actually care about him. And that's why he tells Allison that she's changed, she has feelings, I've seen it, even though he hasn't really. He's just seen her programming, and that's really sad. And I think that in the episode, The Day That Wasn't, there was a moment of her finally breaking through being a robot and like becoming an actual person, because Reginald is gone, so she's allowed to do that now. And then it was the day that wasn't, so it didn't actually happen, which I think is really disappointing. Anyway, so that's pretty much all I have to say on Grace. It makes me really, really sad. Their whole relationship, their whole dynamic, it's just really, really sad. The next relationship I want to talk about with Diego is his relationship with Detective Patch. Now, there's not a whole lot of evidence for this one either, but I just want to bring up a few points. The first one, you know, is just the fact that she is the first person that he goes to when his mom dies, when he kills his mom. She's the first person that he thinks of to be a safe place for him. He doesn't go home, he goes straight to her house, sleeps on her porch. And I think that that is also very, very telling of their relationship with each other. They were obviously dating, she's his ex-girlfriend, and I think that by not knocking on the door and asking to stay on her couch, by just sleeping on her porch, he really, really respects her boundaries, and he respects her as a person. And I think that that's really, really sweet. She was definitely the tipping point between him being just the same person, going down the same route, continuing to just be angry and rebellious and maybe not having any other meaningful relationships. And then the other side where he actually went about like caring about people and trying to actually sort of redeem himself in the eyes of other people, in the eyes of especially Klaus. He definitely tries really, really hard to be a better person and to be better to the people that he actually cares about by showing them that he actually cares about them. And that definitely happened when she died. Because I think that she was really the first person that he ever looked at and thought, I like you, you like me, we're gonna be good together, this is gonna be great. And then they broke up and he was like, well, this sucks. And I think that he always thought that they would get back together, and then when she died, he realized that chance had gone away, it had left, and he couldn't be with her anymore, and it was so sad. And I think that's when he realized, I need to start telling the people that I care about the fact, like, that I actually care about them. In, like, not in words. He never really says that to anyone, but he definitely starts showing more actions. And I think that Detective Patch was really instrumental in doing that for him. So that's all I really want to talk about with Detective Patch. Like I said, there wasn't a whole lot of content with them. I loved their dynamic. I think that they could have been a really great couple, but unfortunately, that ship has sailed unless they go back in time and maybe bring her back. I don't know. Let's do it. Sexy lady cops. Let's go. The next relationship I want to talk about is his relationship with Klaus. Now, I love his relationship with Klaus. I think that it is amazing. I'm like just, oh, it's so cute. It's so cute. I love them. And I want them to continue to interact like that. I think that they were going down a really great path with, you know, in the first episode, Klaus saying, oh, are we leaving? And Diego saying, no, I'm leaving without you. And then Klaus is like, great, I'll go get my things. And then he just shows up in Diego's car, and Diego just doesn't kick him out. Diego, like I said before, Diego still cares about his siblings. He loves his family. He wants them, you know, to be better. But unfortunately, with Klaus at the end of that episode, Diego has to drop him off at the bus stop because he has to show up to a crime scene, even though he's not actually allowed to be at the crime scene, because why not? He's Diego. So I think that with Klaus, he definitely, you know, he started to be better with Klaus. I can't remember if the VFW was in the day that wasn't, or if it was the episode before that. It was the episode before that. And, you know, he was just very caring and cared a lot about Klaus, and he still cares a lot about Klaus. And I think that that's really sweet. I think that part of it also is the fact that he can definitely see himself in Klaus. They were very similar as siblings and as people, just because Klaus, you know, Klaus was probably the most abused by Reginald other than Vanya. And I think that Diego a lot of the times can see himself in Klaus just because that could have been him. That could have been him that was thrown into a room and locked into a room, and he could have gone down the path of addiction. He could have gone down the path of, you know, killing yourself just for a rush. Like, that's, I mean, and Diego sometimes even does that. He sometimes just jumps into danger. Like I said, he's impulsive. And I think that a lot of the reason that he cares so much about Klaus, more than most of his other siblings, is just because he sees himself a lot more in Klaus than he does in anyone else. I think they're two sides of the coin, and Diego's the one that went down the working out route and the saving people route, while Klaus is the one that unfortunately went down the addiction route. And I think that that's really interesting, and I definitely think that that feeds a lot into how Diego talks to Klaus and how Diego reacts or interacts with Klaus. We're so close. We're so close. Okay. The next person that I want to talk about, second to last person that I want to talk about in Diego's life, is Vanya. Now, there's a lot going into how he feels about Vanya, but I definitely think the main problem that he has with her is just the fact that she wrote a book about all of them and the dirty little secrets that were within their family. She wrote about their relationship with their father. She wrote about the stuff that she witnessed as someone who does not have powers. And I think he definitely looked at that book as sort of an attack on him, just because he's Diego and he sees everything that way. I think that he definitely looked at the book as a way for her to air out their dirty laundry for the rest of the world to see for a couple of bucks. And I also think that he definitely saw himself in those pages through the eyes of someone who wasn't himself, and it bothered him. I know if someone wrote a book about my life and I was not asked about it, like if my little brother wrote a book about our lives and talked about me, I would definitely be kind of angry. I don't think I would hold as much of a grudge as Diego does, but I think that I would be kind of upset. And especially in a family that was so corrupt as theirs was, I think that that's really, really interesting, and I'm sure it was very, very upsetting for him. I also think that she most likely, and I really want Gerard Way to write Extraordinary. I want that to be a thing so badly. But I think that in there was a lot of stuff that Diego hadn't really thought about for a while, hadn't really looked at and been like, oh man, that was kind of messed up. And then now that she wrote it down on paper and he's reading it from someone who was within the family but also without of the family, it was something that he hadn't really thought about and hadn't really processed. And reading that over again and looking at his childhood again, I'm sure that it was just so frustrating for him. And maybe he recognizes now that, yes, that was true. What she wrote was definitely what I needed to hear, but it was also, I'm sure, a very, very frustrating and just angering thing that she did. And so that's why he's still so angry with her, because now that Reginald's dead, there's no way for him to really reconcile any of those things. He can't maybe sit down with his father and talk to him and ask him, like, why did you do this to us? We were just children. You should not have put us through that. And so I think that especially at his funeral, there were a lot of heightened emotions, and the just seeing Vanya again and looking at her and being like, you're the one who made me remember all of these things, just made him so angry and so frustrated. But I also think he goes through a lot of development with her by the end. Although, you know, obviously he's looking at Luther as like you're being just like Dad. You're locking her in a room, even though she was already locked in this room when we were young children, and this is frustrating and angering to me. But I do think that him looking through the glass at Vanya and seeing her and seeing how distressed she is, you know, I've said it before, but I'll say it again, he cares about his family, he loves his family, and he does not want Vanya to be stuck in that room, especially since she had to do it before, and she's probably remembering that now since, you know, it's been told to her that she has powers and that's what happened. I just think that he definitely goes through a moment of just being like, she needs help. We need to help her. I know that it was her fault that Allison got hurt, but I really, truly think that we should take care of her because she is our sibling. And I think that that's going to be really interesting to see in season 2. I'm so excited for season 2, but I think it's very, very interesting. It's going to be a very interesting thing to see on the screen again, and to see him kind of trying to reconcile with her and reconcile with what she did, and hopefully they won't just push it down, because that's what the Hargreaves siblings are best at, pushing down trauma. But I think that it would open up a really great discussion between them, just to see, you know, how she felt when she was writing that book, but also how she felt when she was a kid, and him maybe apologizing to her, because I definitely think that Diego is capable of apologizing, and I think the main person that he needs to apologize to is Vanya. Very obviously. The last person that I'm going to talk about today is my least favorite person. I didn't want to do it. I don't want to talk about him. I don't even want to look at him. Luther Hargreaves. I have to talk about his relationship with Luther, because everyone has problems with Luther. I wonder why. Maybe because he's trash. So sorry if Luther's your favorite character, but he sucks. So, not really. So, Luther. Luther is the child who has always been considered number 1, obviously. And I think that that really messed up Diego, because Diego has always been considered number 2, so like I said, he has kind of an inferiority complex. He's always looked at Luther as the leader who does not deserve to be the leader. And I think that he probably has a lot of problems with the fact that Luther is the leader, but he also is kind of a crap leader, and he makes bad decisions, and he doesn't really care about other people, and that's not what a leader's supposed to do. And I think that a lot of his anger with Luther comes from the fact that he's looking at Luther as this guy who has no idea what he's doing. And Diego knows that he could do it better, but Luther's just not letting anyone do it better. I also firmly believe that Diego thought that when he left home, he became better than Luther. He became his own person, and so when they all came back to the house for Reginald's funeral, he came back and their roles were back in place, and it frustrated him because he spent years trying to figure out how to be his own person without his siblings and without his father, and now he's actually kind of feeling like he's number 1, and he's feeling like he's this great person, and then Luther comes in, and Luther's immediately just like, I'm number 1, and Diego's just constantly so mad at him. And I think that's a lot of the reasons that he picks fights with him, is because he's trying to show him that, no, you're not number 1 anymore. We do not have numbers. He brings up the fact that Reginald gave them numbers. Grace, I always want to say Claire, that's Allison's daughter. Grace gave them names. And so Reginald is dead now. Grace is not yet. Grace is not. So let's talk about the fact that she gave us names, and those are our names. Our numbers mean nothing anymore because Reginald is not here anymore. We're not soldiers anymore. We are our own people. We grew out of that. You didn't. And I think that that's a huge part of why Diego is just so angry at Luther. I think another part of why he is so angry at Luther, and the last point that I'm going to make today, because this video is almost at 40 minutes, is just the fact that Luther is not angry at Reginald. He's the only one of all of the siblings who still looks at Reginald as the father figure, as his dad, as the person who cared about him. And that frustrates Diego so much because he realizes he can see why that's wrong. And so just the fact that he's not, you know, Luther hasn't figured that out yet frustrates Diego. And so I believe that that's why he makes Luther get so angry at him, is just because he's like, get angry at me, but then he's trying to redirect the anger. So he's talking trash about Luther, or talking trash about Reginald, so that Luther gets angry at him, but then he's also trying to get Luther to direct that anger toward Reginald, because he also cares about Luther. And I'm gonna keep talking about this because it's true. Diego loves his family, and he keeps trying to get Luther in the right direction and get Luther to figure out that, yes, you're right, our father was not a good person. And so whenever they're fighting, Diego, it's always about Reginald, and it's always about how bad Reginald is for them. And I think that Diego is really just trying to redirect that anger, and I hope that it works pretty soon, because if Luther doesn't figure out that his dad was a bad person, he's just going to keep making the same mistakes. And Diego knows that. He's going to keep acting like Reginald did, because Luther is the most like Reginald out of all of them. And I also think that Diego's gonna start maybe trying to talk through that with him and tell him, like, this is why we're acting like this. This is why we're treating you like this. It's because you're being like Dad, and we hated Dad. And I just fingers crossed that that is a conversation that happens in season 2, because I want to like Luther. I love Tom. He's such a good actor. I want to like Luther so badly. But I can't, and I don't think the other characters can really, until he figures out what he's doing wrong. Alright, guys. This has been a video. It's been a long video. I'm tired. My throat hurts. My mouth is all dry and gross. So I think I'm gonna go. I hope you guys enjoyed my overanalyze of Diego. I was gonna say Detective Diego Hargreaves. If you did, I don't know, do whatever. Leave a like, comment, subscribe. You do you. I can't control your actions. And I'll see you next time for hopefully another overanalyze, but possibly talking about something that I really want to talk about. And it's a secret, so don't tell anyone. I will be making an overanalyze for number 3. If you guys ever get a little worried that I'm not going to make them, leave a comment. I got a comment on my Luther Hargreaves one after I'd been working on this one for a little while, but I wasn't like focused on this one, and then all of a sudden someone was like, when's the Diego one coming? And I was like, oh, that's right, I should make that. So then I sat down and made it a couple days after I got the comment. So yell at me if you want to about the fact that I haven't done another one, because I need that in my life. But yeah, like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, I told you already what to do, although you don't have to because I can't control your actions. And I hope to see you guys in the next video very, very soon. All social medias are linked in the description below. And if you want to, go check out other videos on my channel, because I talk about spooky things and I talk about books sometimes. And get ready next week for a comprehensive vlog on It Chapter 2 and how I felt about it. Oh man, I'm not ready. But it's happening. Anyway, okay, I need to stop talking. These outros are so long. Okay, I'm leaving. Bye!